The wind was sharp, biting at the exposed skin, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and the distant hum of traffic. On the street, a small, trembling figure lay curled in the shadow of a rusted dumpster, its body a patchwork of dirt, matted fur, and raw desperation. The dog's eyes, wide and hauntingly empty, flickered with the kind of sadness that only those abandoned could know. His ribs were visible, his coat ragged, and the only sound he made was a soft whimper, barely breaking the thick silence of the cold city night. There were no footsteps to disturb the quiet. The street was empty, save for the broken pieces of human life scattered across the pavement, discarded bottles, crumpled wrappers, and an endless stretch of concrete. The dog looked up once, through the haze of his exhaustion and pain, as if to plead with the world to notice him. But the world did not. He was just another nameless stray. And then, just as the last vestiges of hope seemed to fade from his eyes, a shadow appeared, not a figure of power or authority, but a woman bundled against the cold, her face soft with concern. Her breath was visible in the crisp night air, but her eyes, focused on the tiny creature before her, seemed to burn with a warmth that contradicted the harsh surroundings. She knelt down, hesitating only for a second, before reaching out to touch the fragile creature, and in that simple act, something began to shift. Something bigger than either of them realized. The streetlights flickered overhead, their yellow glow casting a soft haze over the forgotten alleyway. The world seemed oblivious to the figure huddled beneath the dumpster. His body was a delicate balance of bone and fur, fragile and tired. His breath, shallow and even, clouded in the frigid air as he shivered. His coat, once a proud shade of brown, was now matted and torn, clinging to his body like the remnants of a life he could barely remember. The dog's eyes were dull, reflecting nothing but the emptiness of abandonment. He had been left here, forgotten by a world that often forgot the most fragile among them. No one came, no one looked twice. He was a stray, a shadow in the night, nothing more than an inconvenience to the people who passed by without a second thought. As his body trembled, and the cold seeped deeper into his bones, he lifted his head with great effort, his eyes scanning the darkened street. A figure appeared, not the expected passerby or a fellow stray, but a woman. Her face was hidden behind the collar of a thick coat, her breath visible in the night air. But there was something in her step, something in the way she moved toward him that made the dog's heart skip. She did not look away. She did not hurry past. He whimpered, a soft, pitiful sound that barely left his throat. It was a plea, one that spoke of hunger, of fear, and of the deep, aching need for something he couldn't name. The woman stopped a few feet away, her eyes softening as she looked down at him. Her hand trembled slightly as she knelt beside him, slowly reaching out to touch his frail body. It was as if, in that moment, the world held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Something that could change the course of both their lives. The woman's hand hovered above his fur for a moment, unsure. It had been a long time since she had allowed herself to feel anything that deep. Her life had been busy, filled with the demands of work and the demands of pretending she wasn't lonely. Yet here, in the cold, abandoned alleyway, she found herself overcome with something unfamiliar. It was an ache, not just for the dog, but for herself. She hadn't meant to stop. She had only been walking, her thoughts elsewhere, the weight of her own heart heavy. But now, standing in front of the dog, she realized how much of her life she had spent walking past the things that could heal her. She reached down and stroked his head. His fur was cold and stiff, but there was warmth underneath, something stubborn, something alive. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "It's okay." The dog looked up at her with eyes full of fear and confusion. For a moment, they both just stared at each other, a fragile connection forming between them. Neither of them spoke, but the understanding was clear. The woman could not just leave him here, not like this. She gently scooped him up, his small, fragile body trembling in her arms. The world had never felt colder than that moment, and yet there was a warmth growing inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. She knew, then, that she couldn't walk away. She would take him to the shelter. Maybe he would be safe there, maybe not, but at least he wouldn't die alone, abandoned on this cold street. At the shelter, the warmth of the building did little to ease the weight in her chest. The dog, now given the name Charlie, was given a bed, food, and water, but he remained distant, wary of the hands that tried to comfort him. He had learned long ago that humans were capable of cruelty, and though the woman's touch was gentle, his instincts screamed to pull away. He was still lost in the pain of his abandonment. The woman visited him every day. She would sit with him in the quiet hours, letting him come to her in his own time. The shelter's fluorescent lights flickered above them, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. The sound of the overhead fans mixed with the occasional bark of another dog, but all she could hear was the quiet sound of Charlie's breathing, steady but guarded. She began to notice the small things, the way his ears perked up when she spoke softly to him, the way his tail gave a tentative wag when she offered him a treat. Little by little, he was letting her in, and though he was far from the happy, playful dog she had hoped for, there was a spark in him that made her believe. Maybe, just maybe, he could heal. But healing wasn't a simple thing. It would take time. And as she spent more time with him, she realized how much she had to heal herself. As the weeks passed, Charlie began to transform. His fur grew shinier, his eyes clearer. He began to wag his tail more often and approach the woman without hesitation. The fear that had once gripped him slowly melted away, replaced with a quiet trust. But as he grew stronger, the woman realized something within herself, something that had been growing all along, hidden beneath layers of doubt and fear. The idea of taking Charlie home, of truly committing to him, filled her with an unfamiliar sense of fear. She had always kept a wall around her heart, ever since the pain of her past had taught her to keep people and animals at arm's length. What if she failed him? What if she couldn't keep him safe? But when she looked at Charlie, his eyes full of warmth and hope, something inside her shifted. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when he had already trusted her with his heart. It was in that moment of vulnerability that she realized letting go of her fear was the final step in embracing the love they could offer each other. Now, months later, the bond between Charlie and the woman had grown strong, solidified by the trials they had both faced. She had adopted him officially, and together, they navigated the world with a new understanding of what it meant to truly be loved and to truly love. The streets no longer seemed so cold. In fact, the world around them felt warmer, brighter. Charlie was no longer the fragile, abandoned dog he had once been. He had become a symbol of resilience, not just for himself but for the woman, too. They had both found a way to heal through each other. And as they walked through the park, Charlie trotting beside her, his tail wagging with the happiness that only a rescued soul could know, the woman realized that the love they had was unbreakable. A love forged in the fires of hardship, and now tempered by the steady hands of time. They were no longer strangers in a cold, indifferent world. They were family. The sunlight broke through the trees, casting golden beams across the soft grass beneath their feet. Charlie, now filled out and strong, trotted ahead with a newfound energy. His coat, once ragged and thin, now gleamed in the daylight, the soft brown and white hues almost glistening under the sun. He turned his head back toward the woman, his eyes sparkling with excitement, his body language no longer one of hesitation but of pure joy. It was a sight the woman had never imagined, seeing him not just survive, but thrive. He had become the embodiment of something she had long forgotten. She could feel peace. As they walked along the winding path of the park, the woman's thoughts drifted back to that cold night when she first found him. She had been unsure of what to do, uncertain of herself, of how to help him. But here now, in this moment, there was no question. They had both found what they needed: each other, the world around them. The busy city, the endless demands, the fears, faded into the background. All that mattered was the steady rhythm of Charlie's paws on the earth, the warmth of the sun on her skin, and the undeniable bond that had formed between them. The woman stopped for a moment, feeling the cool breeze against her face, and looked down at Charlie, who had paused to sniff at a flower. He looked up at her, his eyes full of trust, as if he was silently telling her that no matter what had happened before, this was their time. Their pasts, both filled with pain and loneliness, had led them to this moment of mutual healing. Together, they had become something greater than the sum of their scars. A couple walked by with their own dog, a cheerful golden retriever, and the woman couldn't help but smile at the sight. She hadn't realized it before, But it was in these quiet moments, walking with Charlie, seeing the world through his eyes, that she was beginning to trust the world again. Not just the people in it, but the idea that good things could happen, that healing could be possible, even after the darkest times. Charlie, sensing her mood, trotted over and nudged her gently with his nose, pulling her out of her thoughts. She laughed softly and bent down to pet him, her fingers brushing through his now soft fur. "You've come so far, haven't you?" she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Charlie responded with a soft bark, his tail wagging so fast that it sent a few leaves scattering around him. In that moment, she realized how far they had both come. From the cold street to this bright, hopeful morning, side by side. They had faced their fears, fought through the pain, and found something truly remarkable: love that didn't need to be earned, but was simply given. The park stretched ahead of them, the path winding through towering trees, each step forward a promise. A promise that they would always walk together. And though the world outside still held its trials, she knew that as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came with the strength they had forged in their bond. The city skyline loomed in the distance, but in this moment it was distant, unimportant. What mattered was the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet, the sound of Charlie's contented sigh, and the woman's heart swelling with a sense of belonging she hadn't known in years. Their story, one of abandonment, rescue, and healing, was just beginning. As they continued walking, the world seemed to open up before them, as if it, too, recognized the unbreakable bond between them. And for the first time, the woman didn't feel alone. The dog by her side, now strong and joyful, had become more than just a companion. He had become family. They were no longer a stray and a woman. They were two souls, walking in the light of their shared love, bound together in ways that nothing could ever break. And as they rounded the corner, the sun setting behind them, the woman allowed herself to believe, truly believe, that miracles were real. That a dog abandoned on a cold street could not only survive, but also bring someone back to life. And in this life they had built together, there would be no more cold nights, no more loneliness, only warmth and the steady, unbreakable bond that had grown between them, a bond that would last a lifetime. Years passed, but the essence of that first day together remained embedded in the woman's heart. The once shivering dog, Charlie, was now a proud, confident creature. His coat was glossy, his eyes bright and alert, and his once fragile body had grown strong and muscular. Yet, despite the physical transformation, the emotional scars they had both carried seemed to fade with each passing day. The woman, too, had changed. She wasn't the person who had walked through that park with hesitation in her heart. She had found a new sense of purpose, a new way of seeing the world. The pain that once lived in her chest had softened, and the walls she had so carefully built around herself had come down, brick by brick, because of Charlie. The quiet moments they shared, the simple, mundane walks, the soft gazes they exchanged as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, were now a part of her soul. In the evenings, when the world outside quieted down, the woman would sit by the window, her thoughts drifting back to that cold night when Charlie had been alone, abandoned in the city's forgotten corners. She still couldn't fully understand why she had stopped, why she had been pulled to him when so many others had turned their backs. But what she did know was that he had saved her just as much as she had saved him. They had become an inseparable pair, two pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered, only to find one another again. It wasn't just the healing of Charlie that mattered anymore. It was how they had healed each other, how they had come to rely on one another, not as rescuer and rescue, but as partners, as family. One winter morning, as a light dusting of snow began to settle over the streets, the woman bundled herself up and stepped outside, Charlie trotting beside her. The cold air nipped at her cheeks, but there was a warmth that filled her heart. She looked down at Charlie, his breath visible in the air, and smiled. He was no longer that broken creature she had found on the streets. He had grown into something beautiful, something whole. They reached the park where it had all started, the place where Charlie had taken his first steps into a new life. The trees were bare, their branches reaching up to the gray sky like silent sentinels. Yet there was something peaceful about the winter silence, The world paused in the hush of falling snow. Charlie paused, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air, and then he turned to her, as if to say, "We've come full circle." The woman crouched down, her fingers gently brushing his fur.
"Yes,"
she whispered. "We've made it." The bond between them had only deepened with time, and though the world outside had its share of chaos, within their little home they had created something extraordinary. It was a sanctuary built not on perfection, but on love. A love that had withstood the test of time, of wounds, of fears, and the countless shared moments of healing. Charlie, now older but still full of life, nuzzled her hand and looked up at her with that same trusting gaze. The same gaze that had first met hers in the cold, empty street. It was a gaze that had transformed not just his life, but hers as well. And for the first time in years, the woman truly felt that everything was exactly as it should be. They were home. Time, as it often does, moved quietly forward. The seasons changed, as they always would, but in the quiet moments of the woman's life with Charlie, there was an undeniable feeling that time had stopped, or perhaps simply slowed, just enough to appreciate everything that had been rebuilt. The world outside could change. It could turn cold. It could turn warm. But in their world, everything remained steady. It was the small, consistent moments that mattered most. Charlie was now no longer a pup, but a senior dog, his fur tinged with gray, his steps slower, but still deliberate. The first signs of age crept into his movements, yet there was an undeniable spark of joy in his eyes that refused to dim. The woman had watched him grow older, as he had watched her grow stronger. They had both aged, but in ways that didn't feel like loss. Rather, they felt like the deepening of a shared bond, a love that was ever evolving. Each morning, as the sunlight peeked through the curtains, Charlie would be the first to stir. He would nudge the woman awake, his old nose still cold to the touch, but the warmth in his heart as eager as it had been that first morning when he had learned to trust. Together, they would stretch, and he would nuzzle against her, an ever-present reminder of how far they had come. On quiet afternoons, they would take long walks in the same park, where the memories were still fresh. The first time they had walked together, the days when Charlie was still recovering, unsure of whether the world was a safe place. Those days felt like a lifetime ago now, but they were always with them. Every park bench, every tree, every patch of grass had witnessed their transformation. They had healed here, together, piece by piece, like puzzle pieces falling into place in the most beautiful way. The woman had come to realize that she had not just rescued a dog, she had rescued a part of herself. She had walked through life with walls, with a quiet resignation that she could never fully trust the world. But Charlie had changed all that. He had softened the edges of her heart, broken through the fortress she had built, and taught her what it meant to love unconditionally. In his own silent way, he had become her greatest teacher. Even in his older years, Charlie was always there for her, a steady presence that never wavered. And the woman had learned that life, much like their bond, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up for each other day after day through the highs and the lows. Charlie had shown her that love wasn't about a perfect story, but about the quiet moments, the shared silence, the companionship that filled the gaps when words weren't enough. But there were moments of sorrow, too, as they both grew older. There were days when Charlie's movement slowed, and the spark in his eyes seemed to flicker just a little. She noticed the signs of aging, of time catching up. Yet, she knew that even in those moments, the love they shared was enough to carry them both forward. She would carry him, as she had once carried him from the cold street, through every step of their journey. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sky, the woman sat with Charlie by her side. His head rested against her knee, his breathing slower, but still peaceful. They watched the sunset together, as they always had. The world was still, and in this stillness she realized that this was enough. The sunset, the soft rustling of leaves in the wind, the quiet hum of life around them. It was all perfect. They had found their home, not in a place, but in each other. The years had been kind to them, and though time was inevitable, the love they shared had become timeless. No matter what happened in the future, they had each other, a forever bond forged in the darkest moments, now thriving in the light of everyday life. And that was all they needed. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky and the night enveloped the world around them, the woman smiled softly, looking down at the dog who had saved her just as much as she had saved him. Together had written their own story, one of healing, of love, of redemption. And in this story, there would always be room for them, side by side. And no matter how many days, how many years passed, that was the one truth that would never change. As the years turned into a slow, peaceful rhythm, the woman and Charlie's bond grew deeper, woven into the fabric of their everyday lives. Time no longer felt like a relentless force pushing them forward. It felt like a quiet companion that had learned to walk alongside them, respectful of their journey, rather than demanding to be outrun. Charlie's age was evident now. His once energetic gait had softened to a slow, deliberate walk, his eyes carrying the wisdom of years lived, his fur speckled with gray like the first hint of dawn breaking across the horizon. But within him, despite his frailty, burned a light that could never be dimmed. The woman, too, had changed. Not in the way the world had expected, but in the way the heart often shifts when it finds its place. The world had been harsh, and the world had been kind, but together they had built a life beyond the expectations of both. On their walks, now shorter and more deliberate, they passed the old park, the one where it had all begun. The trees still stood tall, their branches reaching to the sky like guardians of the story that had unfolded there. The park had seen their journey in its purest form, from a lonely woman with walls around her heart to a woman who had opened her life to love, from a cold, abandoned dog to a creature that had learned to trust again. The park had been their silent witness to transformation. They'd passed the same benches, the same fountains. Some days, the woman would sit on one of the benches, her hands gently resting on Charlie's aging head, remembering the days when it being nothing but a trembling ball of fur. It was then, in those quiet moments of reflection, that she realized how deeply they had changed each other, and how much they had learned from their journey together. There were moments when time felt heavy, when Charlie's steps grew shorter, when he paused longer, the weight of old age taking its toll. But the woman never felt alone. She knew that whatever time they had left, it would be filled with the same love, the same companionship, the same shared moments of peace. She had always feared the inevitable loss that comes with love. But Charlie had shown her that love didn't end when time ran out. It remained long after. The house, once filled with silence, was now alive with the quiet comfort of shared routines. The sound of Charlie's paws on the floor, the soft sighs he let out as he rested beside her, the joy of feeding him, walking with him, being with him. These simple moments had become her new definition of home. And Charlie, now curled at her feet, was no longer just the dog who had been abandoned on a cold street. He was the dog who taught her that home wasn't a place at all. It was a feeling she carried in her heart every day, every moment. As autumn rolled around again, the leaves falling softly to the ground, a quiet sense of peace settled over the woman. She could feel the years slipping by, but she no longer feared them. She had learned to live in the now, to cherish the moments that couldn't be quantified or measured. And she had learned, too, that love was not just a feeling, but a legacy that could be carried forward, passed down through shared moments and quiet gestures. The park was quiet that evening, the air crisp with the promise of fall, and the woman walked, as she had done 1,000 times before, with Charlie by her side. She had made peace with the inevitable, with the fact that time was finite. But as they walked together, their steps in rhythm, she realized that it didn't matter. What mattered was the love they had given each other, the life they had built together, and the unspoken truth that they were always enough. Their love, like the stars that twinkled above them, would never fade. And even when the seasons changed, when the world continued on without them, it would remain timeless, eternal. Because in the end, love, the love of a woman and her dog, born out of abandonment and healed by compassion, was never just about surviving. It was about thriving together, building something that could outlast even time itself. And so, with Charlie by her side, the woman walked on, knowing that their story was far from over. It lived on in every paw print left behind, in every heartbeat that echoed between them. Years passed, as they always did, and with each passing season, the woman and Charlie grew older. Yet in each other's presence, they were ageless, untouched by the hands of time in the only way that truly mattered, in the hearts they shared. The years had filled them with a quiet understanding, a deep knowing that their love was something unbreakable, something that would outlast the fleeting moments of life. Charlie, once a broken soul left on a cold street, had become a dignified companion, with fur tinned by the silver of age and eyes full of the wisdom he had gathered over the years. He no longer raced to greet the woman in the mornings with the same speed he once had, but his tail still wagged with the same enthusiasm when he saw her. His steps were slower now, more deliberate, but there was a certain grace to them, a grace that had been earned through years of healing, of trust, and of love. The woman, too, had changed in ways she couldn't quite express. She had learned to let go of the fear she once held so tightly. She had learned that life wasn't about avoiding pain, but about embracing the beauty of what comes with it. The tenderness, the loyalty, the raw, unconditional love. And Charlie had been her guide through all of it. One crisp winter evening, the woman sat by the fireplace, the soft crackle of the fire mingling with the warmth of the room. Charlie was lying by her feet, his head resting on the rug, breathing peacefully. She stroked his fur, her fingers tracing the contours of his old, familiar body. For a moment, she let herself feel the weight of time, but it wasn't a sorrowful weight. It was a weight of gratitude, of deep, abiding love. Charlie, now much older, had entered his twilight years, but as they had always done, they moved through this new phase of their lives together, just as they had moved through every phase before. The woman had accepted the inevitability of their shared journey and had learned to savor the quiet, fleeting moments they had left. She had learned to let go of the fear of losing him, and instead she held on to the joy of every shared breath, every moment of peace, and every step they still walked together. And then, one afternoon, when the sky was painted with the softest hues of pink and gold, the woman found herself sitting in the park once again, Charlie by her side. He was older now, but his presence was still as powerful as ever. The park where they had spent so many hours walking together had changed too. New benches, new faces, but the same trees, the same gentle wind that brushed through the leaves. She remembered the first time she had walked this path with him, the way her heart had raced with fear and uncertainty, unsure of what would come next. But now there was only peace. She sat down on the familiar bench, Charlie nestled beside her, his head resting on her lap. They had come full circle, from the cold, lonely streets to this moment, where love had transcended all the pain they had both carried. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, the woman looked down at Charlie, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. He had taught her so much, not through words, but through presence. He had shown her the power of healing, of trust, and of love that does not demand anything in return. And as the sky darkened, the woman leaned down and whispered softly into Charlie's ear, "Thank you for saving me." And though he could no longer respond as he once had, his eyes, still full of that quiet trust and deep love, spoke volumes. They had walked this journey together through the highs and lows, the joy and the sorrow. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As the years passed, the woman and Charlie grew older together, their bond only strengthening with time. Charlie, once a frail, abandoned dog on a cold street, had transformed into a wise, dignified companion. His steps had slowed, his fur turned silver, but the light in his eyes never dimmed. The woman, too, had transformed, not just in the way she carried herself, but in how she viewed the world. Charlie had shown her that love wasn't just something you gave. It was something that healed, something that filled the empty spaces in your heart. Now, as the winter air settled into the world around them, the woman found herself sitting beside Charlie on the same park bench where it had all started. The trees were bare, the wind biting, but there was warmth between them, a warmth that didn't need the sun. The fire that had once flickered so uncertainly between them had grown into something steady, something unbreakable. The seasons had come and gone, but their love had remained, constant, pure, and enduring. Charlie's head rested gently on her lap, his breathing slow, peaceful. For a moment, the woman felt the weight of time, but it wasn't a sorrowful weight. It was a weight of gratitude. She had been given something extraordinary. A chance to heal, to learn what love truly was, and to share it with a creature who had taught her how to live again. The park had changed over the years, new faces passing by, new memories being made, but the woman and Charlie had made their own. In the quiet, shared moments, in every step they had taken together. She had once been afraid of the inevitable loss that time would bring, but now she understood that it was the love between them, the moments they had shared, that would never fade. Their story would live on, not in the absence of Charlie, but in the presence of every memory, every heartbeat they had shared. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, the woman whispered, "Thank you for saving me," and Charlie, eyes bright and full of love, leaned against her. A silent promise that their bond would endure, forever in her heart, the end,